Hi everyone, it's Martha Burgess Novak, and we are here on Real Talk with Martha Burgess Novak. I'm so glad to talk with you all today. We have a special show today. It's going to be on how we present to each other and the real way we can make that a more precise and more loving interaction. This will be about how to present, particularly if you're partners with someone, and if you're not, how to present with friends, with dates, with business associates, with family, you know. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Let's do what we usually do, which is to do a prayer and put ourselves on the same page so we can go forward with this information. As usual, this is a live show. We are having great success with finally having communication go between you all and me, thanks to my husband and his brilliant technology. Our call-in number is 347-850-1647. I'll repeat that later on too if I can remember that. All right, let's do a quick prayer. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are, and all everything is in this world, we thank you so much for today, for all of us being together, and for the information that is not only coming through me, but through everyone who's listening to this show today. We open ourselves to see, hear, sense, and know what you would have us do as our next step or steps. We also open ourselves now to knowing nothing. That it is the you through everything. That is our sole source of real information. Get our brains out of the way so that we may just be and hear your voice. We thank you so much, dear God, for all of this. We say this prayer in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of everyone who's listening. Thank you, and so it is. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted first to announce, and I don't always do this, and I need to do it, that we have a new app. My IT guy, who is my guru, has worked very hard on this app. It is for iPhones right now. He is now working on a Droid version. You can buy this on the App Store. It's only 99 cents. It's under the Teacup Prophecies. I have 2 books out there. You can get these on my website. I'll tell you about that in a minute. One of the books is called The Life You Want, and the second book is called The Teacup Prophecies. So we've done a marvelous little oracle app that is really terrific on that book. So you'll have a lot of fun with it. I hope people are reporting in that they have. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm having a visitor today. This is my visitor. His name is Toffel. So he has decided he's going to be part of the show today. So the only thing that will not go well is if he barks, because it's quite the shrill bark. Let's see if he can be quiet. He's usually somewhere with my husband. We're going to hope for the best. All right. So I'd like to start out today saying that I'm hoping that you're listening to some of these archive shows that are on Blog Talk Radio as well as Facebook Live. Some of the archive shows are contain a lot of information. Hello, Lisa. I can't get it all in assorted shows. I have to spread this information out. It's almost too much to take in. But there's a wonderful DVD, if you have any interest in this, that you can get on my website called the It series, How to Have It, I believe is the name of it. And it's going to talk about things that we won't talk about today, like presenting yourself in a business sense and branding yourself in business and that kind of stuff. What we're going to talk about today Thank you. Lisa just said my dog was adorable. Thank you very much. He is adorable. I think he's great. He's just a handful because he's only a puppy. What we're going to talk about today is how you say things. Because great communication is an art. And one does not just open one's mouth and talk. We take that for granted, that that's what we do, but how we are presenting ourselves and saying things is really quite important. I think that we have to remember to do certain things. Number one, alert people to what we're doing, thinking, and feeling, the people around us. Number two, if it's a negative feeling that you're having, it's really nice to tell them it's not about them so they can feel safe with you while you vent, right? And three, if it is about them or about you all as a couple, then we have to consider the appropriate and honest way of saying it. Sometimes, honestly, it takes a little while to understand what you're feeling so that you can say how you're feeling, so someone else can correct their behaviors. And that's all right, too, if everybody is just patient with that. This is where I fall short. Sometimes I'm not very patient with that. I need to really work on that. So, there's an art to communication. And by the way, I did a show a while back on communication and the art of communicating. I'm hoping to give you a little different information today. So it's less about what you say, although we can all strive, I think, to be more articulate and precise in our language. I find that important, and we'll talk about that a little later in this show. It's not so much what you say, but how you say it that's one of the keys to really good communication. Now, I'm going to give you a little background on me and what we're talking about today. I grew up in the theater, and I was aware of what we're talking about right now rather early on. And after that, when I grew up, I taught acting for many years. And one of the interesting things in theater is a term called subtext, which means what you are really emotionally saying under the words that you're saying. For example, we could take a sentence like, I don't know. I don't know. All right. We can say it with various subtexts. Let me see if I can do this. I don't know, which means back off. That's the subtext, right? We can say, I don't know. Frustration. We can say, I don't know. Indifference. We can say, I don't know. Genuine surprise at not knowing that or not having considered that. I don't know. Confusion. Do I really not know, or do I know? I don't know. Beats me. You see, that's subtext. Whatever's going on underneath the words. Okay. So, in the theater, you learn that there are many meanings to often innocuous words, like the word yes. It's so interesting because poor actors, or actors that have not yet developed themselves, often take a word like that and throw it away, instead of realizing there's a meaning behind it, otherwise you wouldn't say it. There's always an emotional meaning behind something, you see. So, taking this idea of subtext into the real world. Oh, hey Jay, how are you? Aloha to you too. Taking the meaning, subtext, the idea of subtext into the real world, and more importantly into the spiritual arena that we discuss here on this show, one must understand that the way we say things and the subtext we really mean comes from one of two sources. One source, which brings you the lesser results because this is the lesser part of you, and energy matches energy in this world, is the egoic child's mind, the part of you that thinks, feels, and reacts like a child, even though you're an adult. This is the part of you that's fear-based and insecure and angry and resentful and jealous and who knows what else. The unpotentialized part of you is what we're talking about. But, and this is the confusing thing, I think, about a lot of spiritual studies, people don't realize that's still God. It's just God presenting itself in lower energy forms through you, through the what we call ego child's mind. Now, there is also another mind, and this is the mind of the highest self, the love-based, by the way, pure channel for the ascended mind of God. It's creative, it's happy, it's resourceful, it's respectful of yourself and others, and much, much more. My point here in telling you all this, and I know for those of you that listen to the show a lot, you hear what I've just said over and over and over again, and yet this is the thing that's confusing people about God, that all of this is God. The higher vibrations, the lower vibrations, it's all God. My point in saying this is sentences sound vastly different coming out of your mouth depending on which mind you're using. Understand? Okay. Something as innocuous as, do you want dinner tonight? A genuinely easy breezy question, do you want dinner tonight? Can make the other person who wants dinner feel like a burden if the egoic child's mind subtext is added. For example, do you want dinner tonight? Implication again, oh my God, I'm so tired of cooking for you. Get it? All right. There's always an implication, you see, under the subtext. And sometimes the implication, we don't really realize what we're psychologically saying to another person. And that pulls down communication and creates a lot of misunderstandings between people as the years pass. Now, in relationships, in any kind of relationship, but particularly in intimate partnerships, couples thrive when they both feel safe within themselves and with each other. And when I see people who are having trouble, and I see a lot of couples, all right, and I present this to them, they have no idea really what I'm talking about when I say this. I'm hoping to explain in a better way to you. Their confusion is valid, though, because what doesn't make a couple feel safe is when there are negative implications many times when they don't even realize what they're saying to each other. It has become, how they speak has become habitual and continual over a number of years. And they take their dialogue for granted and never begin to look at the subtext they're using under their language. So the partner hears it and reacts to it. An argument ensues because many times we just don't realize what we've done. Well, hello, Ishmael. I'm so glad you're watching. The opposite can happen too, by the way. A man or a woman who has a harping, critical parent can often misunderstand their partners. Okay. Michael and I had this in the early days. Michael's my husband, for those of you that are new to me. I love giving big parties. And as you might imagine, there's a lot to do to give a big party. We've had as many as 100 people or more than 100 people in our house. That's a lot to accomplish, right? Now, I've been giving parties for a long time, and I kind of have a system. And this was really long before my husband came along. Now, this isn't a system that's locked in place, but it is a system to get a lot of things done in a short amount of time. So here comes Michael, who absolutely, genuinely wants to help, but he has his way of wanting to do things too, right? Now, he's got a mom that is the dearest mother in the world. But she is a bit OCD, and she's had her way of doing things. And when he was a little kid, of course, as we all do, we have to do it the way our mamas and daddies want us to do it. Now, I do want to say I don't mind changing my system, but there's a lot to get done. So if somebody doesn't come up with an alternate plan, I'm like saying, here's what we need to do, and let's keep it moving. And Michael, in the early days, before he knew me well and before I knew him well, really reacted to that as I was coming across as very domineering. And one of the things that I think helped us is that I said, honestly, if you come up with a better plan, I'm going with that plan. There are just some things that don't matter here. But if there is no plan on the table, don't mistake my strength and my efficiency for being domineering, because those things are separate things. When I talk about, ladies and gentlemen, we have to be more precise in our language. If you don't learn to be precise in your language and say what really is going on, you can't explain yourself or understand what another person is doing until we get really precise with our language. Now, I think that's a pretty good example of that, because otherwise you lump it all in with someone that you have known in your past that you had a bad reaction to. You see? There are many things to explain in a relationship, particularly an intimate one. Michael comes from a very, very lovely and safe country. But we live in Atlanta, which is a very big city, and Atlanta has a lot of crime. Now, I don't believe in being afraid all the time, but I do believe that one should do what one can do to be safe and then not worry about it again, right? Okay. So here's another story. Michael and I had just gotten home from a lovely trip to the country where we really relaxed. And he was about to take the dog out for a visit to one of the neighbors whom he really loves. So he's going out one door and I'm going out the other. That's how I want to set it up. Now I'm carrying several items, and it made it difficult for me to dig down into my purse and pull out a key by which I could lock the deadbolt of the outside door. So I called to him as he was walking out of the room with the dog, and I said, "Darling, would you come and lock the door after me?" Now I heard a groan, and I saw him rolling his eyes, and he, of course, did, to help me out, which I really appreciated. But I got to thinking about this as I was doing my errands, and that night we had a talk about this. Michael, one of the very nice things about him is he sees me as strong and capable, and that's lovely. I see him the same way, by the way. But there is a line sometimes when he's not watching himself, and by the way, I am going to tell you I do the exact same thing that he does. This is just a story about this incident because it happened fairly recently. There's a little line that we cross in our misunderstanding of the other person's intentions. So when I came home, I made sure that I explained that I wasn't arbitrarily bossing him around, as is somehow familiar in his past. My concern truly was that we were back in the big city, and this was how I was choosing to keep him and the house safe until, I returned and we locked the door again, right? But he heard that he couldn't go out and do what he wanted, and number two, that I was demanding now, and that what he wanted didn't matter to me. That's an old story, and that absolutely was not what was going on. Now, I'm telling you these stories and trying to be really honest. Hello, Mary. How are you? Good to see you. At least your little happy faces down there. I think it's really important to hear things like this and to realize what's going on more subtle levels. And we're going to talk about some tips for you and what I think makes this makes communication better between couples. Obviously, Michael did not hear in that instance what I was really meaning. It took explanation. There are many things that he feels that are perfectly legitimate and right that I don't understand because I come from a background, he comes from a background, has nothing to do that we were in different countries. This has to do with the emotional intention that we are misunderstanding of the other person. This just happens, guys. And this is where the work comes in couplehood. And it's not just intimate couples, although, I think that it becomes very important with intimate couples. But this becomes true of a boss and an employee. I remember a story that one of my dear friends and clients told me about her boss at work, that she mentioned something in a meeting, and she knew her boss was crazy about her, right? But she brought up something that she had not yet had explanation for, and the boss, in front of everybody, shut her down immediately. Shut her down. Oh, she got her feelings terribly hurt. Because when she was a little girl, her family used to shut her down that way, right? And in public, in front of all the kids. All right. So she worried about this. This happened on a Friday. She worried about this all weekend long. She thought she was going to have to go in and quit. All right? But by Sunday night, she realized what she really needed to do, as she was beginning to come out of this, was to go talk to her boss and to say, what the heck went on here? Because I got my feelings hurt. Here's where I took it. Right? So she goes in Monday morning, not knowing, bucking up her courage because she was afraid she might hear something negative, right? She walks in there and the boss said, oh, I am sorry about that. Now, here my client had worried all weekend, right? I'm sorry about that. I didn't want you to mention it because I didn't want other people to know what we were going to do because they would interfere with this and make it much harder for us. So keep this under your hat until we roll this out. Now, if my dear friend and client had just within an hour after that meeting gone right into her office and said what was up, she could have explained everything and she could have had a perfectly marvelous weekend. As it was, she took it to Drama City. It's just what happens. By the way, this is a human reaction. I do this with Michael. Michael does this with me. We do this. This is a human reaction. But part of waking up is to realize your human reaction and realize what you're doing and go in and ask questions and talk about it. Instead of getting very dramatic, as I said, driving to Drama City. All this sounds pretty good, I know. However, I want you to know, I really do know, that it's not so easy to do all this. Here's what makes this work. You have to be aware of what you're feeling. And many people are not aware of what they're feeling. You know, there is a common reaction, which is avoidance to anything uncomfortable. And you've got to learn to wake up to your feelings, and you're trying to avoid them, so you don't. So you actually acknowledge what you're feeling here, because that's the first step. Feelings are a signpost saying, look at something. They are not there to make your life miserable. All right? And you keep in mind things that I say almost every week. There are two things that people argue about. Only two. Everything else falls under these two. Number one, you don't care about me, which is never true, because these people do care about you. And number two, I'm never going to get what I want. That's all you ever argue about. Those are the two arguments in the world. So you have to realize, wait a minute, those were the surmises that I made from my childhood, the assumptions I made from my childhood based on appearances. But are they true now? No, there is a misunderstanding on the table. We got to talk about that. You see? So the first thing you have to do is somehow become more emotionally intelligent and realize you're having a feeling and define what it is. And I say one of the really easy ways to do that is to look at an emotion sheet. They're all over the internet. Print one out and sit there with your sheet and put words to what you're feeling. Now, it's real easy when you're pissed off to say, I feel angry. But what are you feeling right now? You see, emotion is underneath this feeling right now, this thing right now, this moment we're having. Emotion is underneath it. What are you feeling? You've got to be able to define what you're feeling. This is an emotional intelligence, even in the most subtle moments. It's very important that you know how to do that. It's the basis for everything. It will help you become more resilient in life. It'll keep you from being so dramatic, because here's the thing about drama. Drama is when you're not feeling. That's why you stay on the surface and spin around and get all dramatic. You think you're feeling, that's your version of it, but it's not deep. It's not going to help you get anywhere. You're just going to have your fit. Now, I'm not criticizing. All this is human. But what we have to do in our awareness, and certainly our spiritual work, is go from that into using emotion in a better way. Another thing that you have to be aware of is what the other person is feeling with open dialogue. What the other person is feeling by having open dialogue. And you have to be really comfortable with emotion to even hear the other person, don't you? You have to be willing, number 3, to talk an emotional language and be vulnerable. Whoa. I can't tell you, and I'm not picking on men here, but men seem to have a pretty hard time with this sometimes before they've done work on themselves. And I'll say, are you afraid? And they'll say, I'm not afraid. Well, of course, all the things that we're talking about in the ego child's mind have the base of fear. So don't fool yourselves. Don't lie to yourselves. The admission of what we're feeling is the place to start the healing. The healing of yourself, of your friends, of your relationship. This is where we start. All right. Another thing you have to be aware of is you have to find the precise words about what's going on so you can speak intelligently. Again, there's a lot of difference between strong and domineering. Strong is just strong. Domineering is somebody that is very fear-based and has to have it their way or they get upset, right? Quite the difference. So you need to be able to see and speak a more precise language. Now, I'm going to tell you that I didn't always speak a precise language. And I think that a precise language comes from you doing a lot of work on consciousness. I think that that's one of the marvelous perks of this. You start speaking a more precise language. You start seeing things more precisely as well. Now, so those are things to be aware of, but I want to put on the table, I think it becomes very hard to do these things if you have issues up. Most of the time, we'd rather blame the other person. We're frustrated and we don't know how to fix a problem, so we blame the other person or ourselves. Neither of these things is going to lead to a good solution to the problem. Let's give you an image about this. Let's say you look in the mirror at yourself and your hair is doing all sorts of funky things. What do? Think about this a minute. What do you do? I bet your answer is that you fix your hair, huh? But in unaware interpersonal relationships, you yell at the mirror. You yell at your partner. Instead of fixing your hair, and by that I mean looking at what you're doing and becoming more aware of your culpability, your subtext, and what you did that has been misinterpreted in some way, you yell at the other person. That's like yelling at the mirror. What we have to do is fix ourselves, is look at what we did. Yelling at the mirror doesn't make much rational sense, and yet we all do it. It's very human. And we do it until we don't. And that's another way of saying we come out of the child's mind that yells at the mirror and into the adult mind that fixes themselves in their hair and is articulate in explaining why the misunderstanding. In the study of consciousness, you study things like this. You study behavior and subtext, what you might have implied without realizing it. You learn to apologize and to own up to your humanness. And one day, with enough work, you find that the divinity you've been so seeking, the divinity you pretended that you have because you knew you were far from grace-filled, is right there in the humanness, and that you have accepted it. You've accepted it all. The irony here is, when you're studying consciousness, when you're trying to get closer to God, it is not about pushing away your less than stellar qualities, the things you don't like about yourself. What it really is about is accepting them, embracing them, and realizing you are all of it. The light and the dark, the good and the bad, the happy and the sad, the fear and the love. You're all of it. And only then do we start to achieve a oneness with God. Because after all, God is all things too. Now, back to the subject at hand. How to present. Here's some tips that are on the top of my mind today that I'll share with you to hopefully make your relationship with anyone go a little more smoothly. Number one, ask what the other is feeling. Don't assume. Don't tell them how they're feeling. Ask. Ask. When you see behavior that is not in keeping with what you know about this person, ask what's going on. Now, here's the problem. When someone isn't articulate enough to tell you, you have to wait until they are. And the other person needs to take responsibility for talking about this, because, and coming to this as soon as they realize it. I know, it's interesting, I've timed my husband, I've timed me. We have different ways of doing things for sure. I know within about 2 hours what I'm feeling. He knows in about 12 to 24 what he's feeling. So I can be very impatient because I know there's something there, but I don't know what it is, right? And he can't tell me until he's had some time. So this is where we struggle, because my frustration comes out, and because I don't understand how he's feeling, I can be very hard during this period of time waiting for it. Something happened that he misunderstood and I misunderstood the other day, and sure enough, when he told me what it was, I went, oh, I didn't realize I was doing that. I didn't realize I was doing that. It's over. The argument's over when I get it. But it's really important. You know, a lot of times, though, I've got to tell you, a lot of times, instead of feeling frustrated, I'll just go do something that I enjoy and know that he's coming along and he will tell me when it's time. There was a lot of drama connected with this. Something broke in the house that meant something to me. And that's why I was just not inclined to wait patiently. All right? That was certainly the ego child's mind. I tend to not like drama anyway, you know. I'd like everybody to just speak up. Doesn't always happen that way. We've got to know what people can do, and we've got to know what we can do, and let that be all right. And we have to listen to what they have to say. Then ask that they listen to you. Here's the rub, though. I don't want to hear stuff that isn't true. And sometimes you have to listen to stuff that isn't true before you get down to the nugget of truth there is. It isn't about the pans not being stacked. It isn't about you don't do this and you don't do that. When you hear a lot of scattershot coming like that, there's something that's not being said. And that's what takes 12 to 24 hours. That's what comes out finally. When I'm beginning to interpret everything you do as an order. Can you be kinder in how you are saying things? I didn't realize that. I'm so sorry. I will make sure that I am kinder in the way I say things. And then literally the argument is over. Okay. Try to realize, next point, that when you're angry, you are actually trying to gather evidence against the other person to support the story you tell yourself. Now, the story that you tell yourself comes from your childhood. This is what everybody does. So let's go back to the story I told you about Michael coming and locking the door behind me when I requested that. Something like his story was, women are all alike. They interfere with what a man wants to do. I can't just walk across the street to see a neighbor without my wife demanding I do something else. childhood stuff, right? Taking how he misinterpreted the mother, and what do we want to say here? And bringing it into the present, generalizing it to all women and to his wife. Now listen, don't you think for a moment that Michael's the only one that does this. I do this too. When I see a lot of drama, and he's a little bit more dramatic than I am, when I see a lot of drama, I really judge it. I'm really impatient with it. I don't like it. My dad was real dramatic. That's me dragging the past into the present, you see? Now, we've got to realize what we're doing, because if you can just realize what you're trying to do, gathering evidence against your beloved person here that you chose, we have to say, no, I don't really want to do this. Fact is, my hands were full. I should have gotten the key out beforehand. I didn't. I was concerned for his safety. He helped me out. There just doesn't need to be any more drama than that, right? There is no story to most things. It's just the facts. Your story comes from when you take the present time and you drag the past into the present and you make a story around it. This is the problem. Just let it be facts without the emotionality around it all, you see? Without the emotional attachments from the past. This, realizing what you're doing when you're doing something like this, helps you come out of angry feelings sooner. Because you say to yourself, hey, I'm creating a story around this based on my past. And are these things true in current time that I'm saying to myself? And the answer is generally no. What is true is that you are only seeing from a certain perspective. This is the perspective of the child. What happened to you in the past. So, important to cool off, and when both of you are less angry and willing to come out of your story, that's when you have a discussion, you see? When you do sit down to talk, I think it's important that both of you state how you feel and what your true intentions were. You have to be honest. You can't make this up. I actually know someone who's very fast on his feet. Oh my God, this is a friend of ours. He's very fast on his feet. And he is almost exclusively in the ego child's mind, but man, he has a great excuse for everything. And he looks like a jewel, right? Not a jewel. He's rather emotionally immature, but he's got a great excuse. And this is part of his survival pattern. And it's a shame, because one has to tell the truth in situations like this. If your egoic child's mind has the reins, admit it, apologize. What you don't want to do is stay in this place of being angry. You don't want to stay in the place of who did what to whom, because the solutions aren't there. The solutions lie in, well, if this were to happen again, what would we do differently here? You see? What would we do differently? Well, most of the time for me, I'd go shopping or something. I'd go do something to make myself happy and just let some time pass and then talk about things. You've got to understand that arguments are very good because they reveal where you aren't loving. Where I'm not loving, where Michael's not loving, where you're not loving. That's all they do. Because we're making a case in our egoic child's mind. And we'll never be particularly happy there because we are love. We are these higher aspects of God. We've got to learn in all sorts of ways to be more loving. So, if this happens again in the future, how are you going to handle whatever it is in an emotionally mature way? That's where the solutions lie, you see. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa says it's true. All right. Also, I want to put something else on the table that helps see you through. And I'm very proud of Michael and me because we always get to this, which is love is the most important thing. Eventually, after a day or so of throwing ourselves around, we realize, wait a minute, love is the most important thing. Real love, the kind of love that lasts and sustains. But from time to time, how we treat that love needs to be reevaluated and cleaned up. All of us need to reevaluate and clean up love and how we're treating it. You know, I have a favorite poem, favorite quote. It's one that's often quoted, but it's not often quoted all the way through. So I thought I would remind you of this. It's by Robert Browning, and it's one of my favorites. Here's the poem. I'm just going to do the first part of it. Grow old along with me. The best is yet to be the last of life, for which the first was made. Our times are in his hand, who saith, a whole I planned. Youth shows but half. Trust God, see all, nor be afraid. Isn't that beautiful? The last of life for which the first was made. As we age, we're supposed to be wiser about all this, right? I think when we are doing it right, we realize more and more about what love really is and what is right. I think that there are no mistakes in life. I think sometimes we must learn soul lessons by the absence of love as well as the presence of it. Doesn't mean, no matter what our lives look like, that we're not learning something important on a soul level, you see. That's why I think judgments are just so unimportant in the end. One thing that I'm reminded of, and that is a dear person that I worked with a number of years ago. I have lost touch now. I have a feeling that he passed away because this was quite a number of years ago. And at that time he was 92 years old. But his name was John. And John was sent to me by the casting agent in town. And he was precious, but he was just the quintessential perfect old man that you'd want to cast in movies, right? And she sent him to me because she couldn't quite tell what was wrong, but she couldn't cast him. And she wanted to because she liked him so much, too. And he was talented. So he came to me and he read for me, and I saw right away what the problem was. His energy wasn't high enough for you to stay with him, right? You know, actors, there's another part of it. If you want to know more about this, certainly please get the It series that I told you about. You can get it on our website. It's a DVD. And the website, I should say, because I forgot that part, is MarthaBurgessNovak.net. .net. We're .net, not a .com. Anyway, when John came to me, his performance was very small. And, you know, if you're going to be the spokesman for a car company or you're going to be the spokesman for this or that, you've got to have a certain amount of energy, internal energy, right? Doesn't have to be big like that you might use on the stage. You're in a little box, the screen, but your energy has got to be up to sustain interest. Okay. So I explained in much more detail what the problem was. And I said, John, you know, you're 92, so why don't you walk up and down a little bit, just get your physical energy up and read again. And he said, no, I think I can do this without doing the walking. And I said, all right, but really nobody has ever been able to do that. So I suggest, hi, Randy, I suggest walking up and down. And he countered me again. He said, you know what? I really would like to try it without doing that. So in my arrogance, this was a number of years ago, I said, all right, thinking he's not going to be able to do this. But let him prove it to himself, right? And by gosh, he put his head down a minute, and he came up, and he was perfect. I was completely shocked. Really, I was. I'd never seen anybody in all my years of teaching that could do it. And so I said, John, how did you do that? And he said, I'm 92 years old. What do I have to be afraid of? Now, suppose we adopt to that and we're much younger. Suppose we find out, as you do in consciousness studies, there's really nothing to be afraid of except bringing the past up over and over again. Suppose you live your life and you create what you want and you know what love really is because you're there and that's who you are and you're well aware of it and you're aware that that's who your partner is too, and your boss, and we all fall short from time to time of being that loving, but suppose we get the way the world really is. And suppose we know how to fix everything that breaks. It's a nice way of living, I think. That's the reason that I thought we ought to talk about what we did today. How to present things, how to talk to people and communicate more effectively. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I certainly have enjoyed talking with you. And we'll be here next week, too, at our normal time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You could do a big favor for me, though, and that is please like us and follow us and get the word out that we are doing this show every Sunday. And we have a whole bunch of archive shows for free on Blog Talk Radio and blog and Facebook Live, both of those things. We would love to encourage you right now to do study groups around some of this material. Some of the groups actually I'll be delighted to talk with when you all have a lot of questions. It's quite a nice service that we provide. And you'll see on our website, too, that we have some wonderful people that have trained in this. And certainly, if you're interested in training for this, contact us. Okay? Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm just so glad. Thank you so much for all of you all and your participation in all of this. I love you very much. Even those of you I haven't met yet, I hope one day to do so. And certainly, I do hear from you from time to time through the website, and I do say, please write me and let me know what you're thinking and feeling. And if there are any questions that you have or comments that you have, I would love to hear them. And certainly, I adore hearing from you on Facebook Live as well. Hi! Well, thank you, Kat. Appreciate that. let's do a quick prayer now to let whatever we can let go of this go, so that we may be more aware of how we're presenting what we want to present. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are and all everything is in this world, thank you so much for who we are, for what we're doing here, for learning and growing, and for the marvelous opportunities that are always in that kind of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual movement as we grow deeper and more loving in our work on ourselves. We thank you so much as we open ourselves now to whatever you have us do as a next step. We ask that our confusion is surrendered to you, that it may change into clarity just for the next step. All we have to do is make one more step and one more after that. Help us not be overwhelmed with all this wacky confusion in this world right now, but keep our minds about us. Realize which mind we are in, either the egoic child's mind or you in your ascended arena. We aspire to be the channel for you in the world in a loving way. So, we surrender all of these issues and blocks and needs to hold on to them, vestiges and related issues, identities over identities, sympathies over sympathies, definitions of self and roles that we have played that no longer serve us. And we say thank you to God for it all. We're happy with what we've got. All is changing. All is changing for the better. Open our minds to this, dear God. And we say this prayer in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of each and every person listening today. And so it is. So, thank you so much. Remember the app, 99 cents on the App Store if you have an iPhone. The other one will come out in the next few months for Droid. And we have all sorts of resources on that website, marthaburgessnovak.net. Please listen in. And I'm trying to fend off a cat who is trying to get on camera right now. Here he comes. All right, well, we might as well let him. This, ladies and gentlemen, is also Schnitzel. And he's a very, very fine boy. He just has to love you all the time. Okay? Guys, thank you for listening. I'll see you next week at 10 o'clock Sunday morning Eastern Standard Time. And you all have a happy 4th of July. It's almost here. All right? Celebrate your freedom in all sorts of ways. God bless you all. Bye-bye.